Hi, Lubna. How are you?
Good. How is the winter?
Good. The snowstorm was very much blown out of proportion. It did snow, but it's not bad. So everything is perfectly fine now. But it was beautiful. It was really
Well,
lovely. It was all day Sunday for me in New Jersey. I think maybe it might have been a little longer for other people, but it was very nice.
that actually is a great segue to the topic because weather is very uncertain. And today we're going to talk about living with uncertainty.
Yes.
When we thought about the topic, I think from my end, I was thinking about how my life experiences took very interesting, unpredictable turns. And the takeaway for me is that uncertainty has become the default, not the exception.
Hmm.
While modern life sells us this idea of linearity or predictability, but historically, most humans lived with far more uncertainty. So I don't think what's new is uncertainty. It's the our intolerance of it. I think we
Mm.
structured our modern lives with a lot of tools to manage the anxiety that comes with uncertainty. So I'd love to hear your thoughts about how uncertainty sits with today's life, modern life.
So for me, it's I'm really excited as I always am. I say that a lot, but I am very excited about this topic. Because I haven't been working for the last 6 months, so I've been just in a state of uncertainty, professionally speaking.
Mm,
And and I feel what's so interesting about this experience for me right now is that I feel very calm in this uncertain state, which is
oh,
interesting. Yeah, given that and I think this goes back to just a lot of the spiritual work that I've been doing, a lot of the inner work that I've been doing, because I look back at my old self and I hated uncertainty, like many people do. I was so
right.
uncomfortable if I was uncertain about certain relationship dynamics, or I was uncertain about job prospects, right? Many in the back in the day, right? And that kind of coming to the fore now, given that I'm not working and how I feel so at peace now. And
Mm,
a lot of that, and also just given the political environment, that at times can provide me with a feeling of uncertainty. But I guess the thing that with me is I don't feel that the situation uncertain. I think it's quite dire. And so there's no uncertainty. There, unfortunately, is more just of like, where is it going to go? And we don't know. So we just don't know
are you talking
what
about the political
the political
situation?
environment and climate in the US, yeah,
Okay,
specifically
I
the
see.
uncertainty of
Okay.
that. Or it feels
Yeah.
very certain to me in the sense of like, okay, we're not in a great place,
Mm,
personal, in my personal opinion. It seems very, even if you think it's going in the direction you want or not, we just don't know. It's not in a great place in my personal opinion. So yeah, for me, uncertainty in the modern world is a place to pause. I think it provided me anxiety in the past, but nowadays uncertainty gives me
mm,
pause and sort of to live more in the present, I'm sorry, in a way that I had never done before. And one sort of small brief example I can give is, when I was younger, I was very studious, I was very ambitious, everything was very exponential growth, like you said. It was like, okay, do good grades in school, be a good kid, follow do these things and then you'll get into a good school and then you'll get into a job. So up until probably like middle school to high school, that was like the attitude I had. And I felt very certain in my future prospects because that was also what I was told is going to happen. It's
mm.
like if you do XYZ, right, that sort of facilitated or really encouraged that thinking all around the world, even though that's like not true at all. That is not how life works. Life is not an
Right.
exponential path or a linear path. It's literally just it's ups and downs, and it can go down and it can go up, and that's just life. We're not trained to think that way, unfortunately. And I think if we did, we'd have a lot more healthier attitudes about so many different things and probably like less mental anguish and illnesses.
Right.
But anyway, so for me, it was like for such a long period of time and it worked and it provided me with a lot of internal comfort in that sort of, and especially because it felt like it was happening. I saw that. So then I go to college. And
Mm,
so yeah, middle school up into college, that was my thinking. Got my internships, did everything I need to make myself more employable in the eyes of companies and organizations. And then the 2008 recession happened, right?
right.
And it was like, no, that was not what was happening. And the people, it wasn't even if you went to a top school or whatever, I didn't know how to navigate certain things in a way that maybe other peers of mine who didn't have parents who were immigrants or whatever you want to call it. Because my parents grew up in a generation, they came here for college, and it's like, yeah, if you went to school, you did this, you get a job. It was a very straightforward process. But for me,
Mm,
with a liberal arts education, even if it was a top school, I didn't know how to navigate how to get a job in New York or any of these things. I just would send out my resume, and that wasn't wrong per se, but it was just a highly competitive environment given the fact that there was an economic crisis that was the 2008 recession, which contributed to so much anxiety and uncertainty
right.
for me. And it led to stress, like internal stress. I think that was also the beginning of my insomnia. So full disclosure, everyone, in terms of like my issues, one of which is I suffer from insomnia. And I really do think that was like the beginning of my insomnia was during
Mm,
that time because once I graduated in 2010, it was so hard for me to get like a full-time job with benefits. I had like different jobs that I got as like a consultant or a contractor. I had one full-time job at a startup and then I got laid off for the first time. And then I got another job, but it was like a 1-year project and I was a consultant. I didn't have a full-time corporate job until I was 27. You know, I had worked all the time, but it was just such a hard market for me to enter into in the US. I was always working, but just in terms of like a full corporate I had 9 to 5 jobs as like a contractor is the term. So I was just
right.
like, so my 20s up until like, yeah, up from 22 to 27 was just such a full of anxiety and uncertainty. And it just was like the beginning of a lot of, yeah, like anxiety, depression, insomnia, like a lot of chronic issues for me. Whereas
Yeah.
now, given a lot of the internal work that I've done, my relationship with uncertainty is, yeah, like I said earlier, it's a moment for pause, self-reflection. I
Mm,
don't feel any of that anxiety or stress. The sleep is a little bit better, but I don't want to jinx it. But that's how I feel. I think it's a
yeah.
realization also of like that sort of deconditioning of recognizing that life is not certain. So once you
Right.
do that, it gets easier when you do deal with uncertain situations, circumstances, etc. So that's
Yeah.
kind of how I
I
feel
love,
in the modern
yeah, I
context.
love that you talked about like sitting in the uncertainty. And this is sort of your phase after your spiritual work. So the post kind of the Hawa 2.0, basically.
Yeah.
Because I know, in Buddhism, for example, they talk about how impermanence as the truth. It's not a problem. It's something you work with, you adapt to, you sit with. Same with Sufism. There's a lot of like surrender. It's not
Yeah.
passivity, it's surrender, with the flow of life that is unpredictable. So a lot of spiritual traditions talk about training the soul, the mind, the body to sit in stillness with the chaos and unpredictability, uncertainty of life.
Hmm.
Um, but I think that our training in other ways as now adults in this modern economy actually encourages the opposite. Is the hyper productivity planning, micromanagement of things, um, and starting from the educational system, which I think is extremely problematic, that they train us to problem solve within a parameters are extremely limited. So you're trained throughout the year or the semester on specific way to problem solve. All the problems that you are presented as a student are predictable. They change very few variables. And then at the end of the semester or the year, you take an exam, you have to pass that. But then life problems are not like that.
Hmm.
The parameters of the problem are not as predictable and as limited and as tight. So I don't think, and I guess this takes us to a conversation, different educational systems and ways of learning and efforts to create alternative education that overcomes this limitedness in training. But to focus on mainstream, let's say most public schools in many countries, they remain to train students and to problem solve in that way. So those people walk into the world, outside of the school, and the problems we are faced are not cleanly defined as well as that. They're not as limited in terms of the variables. So we have to be extremely creative in connecting the dots, understanding where resources are. So back to your example in the 2008 recession, sending resume might work. That's one way, but there are many other ways And it's only by exposure and training to understand how you connect these different dots in the economy, how you make yourself visible, employable, blah, 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 that you would have known that you have other ways to solve this problem.
Right.
And so I think because in very similar ways, I think control for me was for the longest time a refuge, an escape to overcome my anxiety. But now I realize it's a psychological illusion. It's trying to overcome my deep-seated fear of being swept away by life, by the unpredictability in life. And I think my early upbringing, some of it shaped that fear, or it planted that fear. Definitely maybe my personality, the type of personality that I have. Now, over the years, I definitely became more extroverted or outspoken, whatever, however you want to define it. But early on, I was an extremely introverted kid. So living in my feelings and my thoughts and my inner world was huge.
Mm.
So walking out of my inner world to the outside world was frightening. And the outside world was always seemed to me unpredictable and uncertain and chaotic. So I absolutely mastered control and anxiety control tools, planning, micro planning, lists, think about things, weeks in advance, prepare. But I think I did confuse preparedness with certainty. And most of my stress as an adult came from mistaking the two. And there are many phases in my life which you witnessed where I think parts of my identity collapsed when certainty disappeared. So, for example, when I left Qatar, which is an extremely small society, back then when I grew up, so the entire population of the country, I think, was no more than 1 million people, or even, yeah, definitely maybe 800,000. So it was an extremely small place, a small economy, small social circles. A lot of things are predictable and certain. So Oh, or so I thought, um, until I really understood the social fabric and how the hierarchy is designed there, and who is on the top of food chain and who's not, and the ability to climb the social socioeconomic ladder, or the inability in this case. So once I understood all of that, then I stepped away and I came to the US with a promise of having better mobility across different classes, or ability to pursue life and my vision of life and the way I would like it to be pursued. So with that, there's definitely a shock to the identity, like from being an extremely small fish in a small pond to this, like, you know, uh, an Arab girl who was educated in conservative public schools in Qatar in Arabic, going to New York, this, international business hub where I have to compete with people who have been prepared and have been preparing for the New York lifestyle, whether it's socially, economically, all the demands that it puts on you. So there wasn't a shock to the identity. I felt that the certainty of who I am, how I viewed myself, has gone away. And it was almost, I did that to myself. It wasn't even external circumstances that forced me. Like, for example, people get displaced due to war, or they get extremely ill and they lose their abilities to do certain things. So there's like a redefinition of their role in society, what they're able and unable to do or think. Or in my case, it was a lot of it me choosing to leave a certain place where my identity was clear and certain, and everything was very much easy to define, to a place where there isn't really a clear roadmap.
Yeah.
So I think the two are very connected, identity and certainty.
Yeah.
And last thought is, I think uncertainty exposed to me how much my identity was outsourced to structures. In that case, the structures that existed in Qatar, like me being the daughter of a certain man of certain status, or me, having attained certain educational level or this and that, whatever the social markers that signaled acceptance and validation externally, um, I have definitely outsourced my identity to those in Qatar, willingly and unwillingly. I think a
Yeah.
lot of us do that. But when I moved to New York, I realized that this is what was happening, and now I have to come to terms with facing what my identity is without these external structures, without that certainty.
Mm.
So I wonder in your life, did you face something similar or different when it comes to identity and certainty?
Hmm. I guess for me, I don't know, again, because a lot of that identity shift happened to me in the last 3+ years, I would say, solidly. And when, for example, I've had certain awakenings or realizations in regards to my spiritual path, I don't know what it is, but it never felt jarring. For me, it felt when that identity shift happened, right? When I realized that, oh, these original belief systems I have or were raised with are not, I don't want to say not believe per se, but that it's just going in a different path, right?
Yeah.
It felt like a sense of relief. Like, I don't know why. And it never felt scary. What felt scary, what felt really uncertain and frustrating for me is that, for so many years, I was constantly seeking the truth. I was born into a certain ideology and I struggled with that. I had so much I wanted that certainty that everyone else around me felt with what they
Mm,
believed. And I wanted that so much for myself. And and I would acquiesce. I'd be like, okay, this is just what I believe because that's what everyone around me believes, right? And then when I was struggling, there was struggle in that. I'm like, I am uncertain. There's a part of me that's uncertain about this belief system, but I'm too scared to dip out of it. I'm too scared to leave because of what you spoke of the structures, the familiar structures, the sort of cultural structures that are in place around it. And once in the last 3+ years, as I shared, kind of was having certain experiences and, learning different things, it felt the level of comfort my soul felt, I guess, or my identity was finally like the opposite, if that makes
mm,
sense.
yeah.
I guess that's the only real feeling. It wasn't I can only say I felt all that uncertainty while I was in it. I was born into this thing and then I really wanted to believe and I was struggling and there was this, but there wasn't doubt per se. It was just like, I'm not feeling it. I would always say that. I'm like, I'm trying to feel. I
Mm,
want to believe. And I would create all these sort of justifications and whatever because I wanted to be, good, whatever the hell that means. That once I finally came across certain ideas and beliefs that resonated more with me internally, I just felt relief. I can't think of like the opposite right now. I don't know why. Or what you speak of, I'm sorry. Because I guess I'm just in such a state of like relief and peace, Lubna. That fact that like the conditioning of our lives, like when you were speaking about your experiences, I'm always like, why are people lying to us? Why are older people when we were younger telling us, why do they project this certainty that they themselves know does not exist? Because if they're older, we all have ups and downs in our life. Maybe because the baby boomers had a certain sort of consistency in a way that our generation doesn't. But do you feel like why are they? I don't want to say they're lying. I don't think it's like an active strategic choice or something, but it feels like why weren't we conditioned to accept these Buddhist or Sufi ideas you
right,
mentioned?
right, right.
Why?
Oh, totally
Particularly
agree
by
with you. I
significantly
actually
older
thought,
people. I'm like, you
yeah,
know that life is uncertain. You've seen so many things, especially in the American context, like people are fearful of death. Death is not normalized in American culture at all. Yeah, not in the way that I feel like the like Eastern, I don't want to say Eastern, but other countries outside of like the United States. I think even Europeans
because,
probably have a healthier relationship with death. We're
yeah,
very youth oriented. We're very obsessed with youth and being younger, everything is last minute. It's too late to do this. You're too late to get married. You're too late to have kids. You're too late. Like there's this neuroses around that. But yeah, I'm just
Right.
thinking and
But I mean,
speaking with
not to
you, like,
digress, but I can
no,
see
please.
how the US would be fearful of death. Like my reading of the many of the behaviors that I've seen around, it's a culture of consumption, abundance, indulgence, in good and bad. Like it's a
Yeah,
culture
yeah,
of
for sure.
extremes. So all of that comes generally from the external world. Now imagine someone tells you this all will be shut down when you die. Like I don't think people sit with their inner world um, as much in the US
No.
because they're
Yeah.
constantly seeking stimuli. It's wild. When I first moved to the New York, I think my nervous system got burnt out, and it's not a New York thing. I thought
Yeah.
it's just a New York thing. Then, I lived in California for a while. Now we're in Puerto Rico, travel to different cities in the US. I think it's more integral to the DNA because it's an economy that encourages consumption and the dollar to flow around. And that won't happen if you're just sitting meditating in your corner in the house. They want you to be actively engaging with everything that is possible in the external world. Now bring again the idea of death, which is silence, quiet to all of this. It's a very loud culture. Anyways, I digress, but back to your point.
But it is, sorry, and even like, in America, again, we're conditioned to live as if, I think living in the belly of the empire, which is the US in many ways, you're
Yeah.
sort of fed this delusion of America's the greatest country in the world. It is the leader of the world from a military perspective, from a financial perspective, et cetera. So also even in our generation, I think people are very delusional to think like America will always remain that way forever. So we're very
Yeah.
ignorant of history, the way we or even the way that
Yeah.
we study World War II. It's like those other countries deal with that reality, of uncertainty, of that, the sort of empires that fall and rise. But in America, we're different, But I wonder if that's just like the mentality of an empire state, you just have to
Yeah.
kind of delude the people into believing and there's advantages. You want to stability creates financial security, there's benefits to from a material perspective when you delude
Right.
yourself and others into this concept of certainty. But I feel like, and yeah, you don't want to have a healthy spiritual society, as we discussed on so many episodes. There's benefits to not having people aware of mindfulness or, the importance of, and even these terms, as much as they were very common the last 5, 10 years, they're not as mainstream as we think, right? In terms of meditation,
Mm.
mindfulness. I think people it's not as integrated even for myself. Like I want to have a better practice around these things. I think yoga is the only thing that I consistently do that helps me remain present. So I'm doing something consistently, but yeah, that's how I feel. Just back to what I had said in terms of just moments of uncertainty tied to my identity. I mean, I think it was more, I
Mm.
felt that a lot within the belief systems that I was raised in from a family perspective and that sort of doing the
Yeah.
reverse as I got older. So
It's
that's why I'm like
beautiful that,
chill. I'm like the world is I mean, I'm not trying to be like funny when I say this, but
yeah.
yeah, the world has always this is nothing new, the state that we're in. There's nothing new. I think the
What is
problem is we
the
don't
state
realize
we're
it
in?
like on a personal level. Collectively, we see that, but individually, I think we struggle a
What
lot.
do you mean by saying there's nothing new about the state we're in?
Sorry, I guess
Like
I
the,
was thinking from a political social perspective, like
oh,
again,
I
thinking
see.
about how in the US, like even in the world, the Middle East, like what's going on, like just the world from a political perspective. I think we always say collectively this is crazy, but the collective is, you know, I don't know what I'm just trying to say. I think we need to take this down, which we're doing in this episode, but I liked what you said about identity too, is like, is that what I'm trying to say? Sorry, I'm all over the
No, no,
place.
no, go on. Yeah.
Is that like just scratch that. Ignore what I'm saying. I have to like rethink my thoughts around this. I'm just thinking about like the collective versus the individual and how
Mm.
I think even in the US, again, not to make it US focused, but just my personal experience, um, I think Americans ignore. I'm going to cut this part, but
Yeah, I'll go back to the question you posed about baby boomers and the generation that raised us and why. they didn't condition us or socialize us into the idea that the world is uncertain. Just build your tolerance for it. Like that should be the primary message, in my opinion. I wonder if some of it is this parental love that,
Mm.
you see the innocence in the kids and you don't want to tell them how awful the world can be, kind of, because you
Yeah.
never know how the future. So there's optimism built into that parental philosophy that, um, and then maybe pushing down, in some households, I'm not saying everyone parents the same way, but the idea is that agency, you can do something about it. Hence, learn more, be productive, learn how to, so like pushing more of an active, um, project, so the kids would feel that they have that level of control again
Mm.
over the uncertain. So I think from my perspective now that we're older, I think this idea of busyness is actually, is avoiding not knowing, which is the uncertainty we live in with doing more. So it's, in my
Yeah.
opinion, definitely not the solution. Maybe it takes you somewhere. Maybe keeping busy for some people is a healthier approach. And I'm not saying being workaholic, but as opposed to sitting there and just thinking and reflecting about how unpredictable and uncertain the world is. Maybe that works better for some people. Um, I also think that certainty gives maybe more comfort than actual growth or meaning.
Yeah.
Because again, in my experience, moments where I had to grow and learn more and push myself out of my comfort zone were moments that were uncertain.
Mm.
Um, but I also think for someone like me with my psychological profile, it's not very healthy to constantly live in uncertainty. Some people like to live on the edge of the world, I guess,
Yeah.
not. So a healthy dose of it keeps me going. But what are your thoughts, I think, around the idea that creativity or creation occurs in conditions that are uncertain, that we grow complacent, we grow lazy when things are so predictable, so known?
So comfortable. Yeah. A lot of great ideas came from moments of uncertainty or rest, like moments of just doing nothing. Like that's another thing. This conversation is also making me think about the importance of nothingness sometimes or silence, and this sort of tendency to be busy bodies is also so tied to our worth in the society we live in. So that's why, again, I liked how you mentioned identity, because I think it's really more about, you know, you doing a lot, being productive. But it's just funny because if you read stories of people who've invented things or stories that they wrote,
Yeah,
novelists, like it didn't come from a moment of like work, 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 constantly doing things. It's certain. It's like, I don't know. Let's just, the power of I don't know.
yeah.
And being settled in that is sometimes when the idea comes through. But, my bigger issue is that we're not like I liked what you said about the kids, like as a parent, you want to provide because there's emotional safety for the child. I don't
Right.
think the child should be living in a state of uncertainty, but it's more teaching them like there's moments where it's okay to not know. Just sit with that feeling. Like I think how do we train children or teach, I shouldn't say train, but like how do we create an environment in which we don't say like it doesn't have to be negative. It's almost like a neutral position, right?
Right.
And sometimes the best ideas come from not knowing or that it's not even about ideas. Like I feel like I'm still tying it to like some idea of productivity of like a something that will come out of it because sometimes just the moment of like it's okay to just be in the thick of it and just wait. I don't know. Right?
No,
Like
I agree 100%.
and I
I
just
would just um
but I do
qualify.
think oh, sorry. You go.
No, I love what you said. I think it's brilliant. From a parenting perspective, my take is that ideally I would love for my son to expose him to lightly expose him to experiences where uncertainty is present and he has to kind of push himself to problem
Yeah.
solve. But I would qualify that very strongly by saying these are tangible, material, abstract problems, not emotional problems. What I mean by that
Mm.
And I think my upbringing was largely shaped by that. The emotional uncertainty is hugely problematic, and I wouldn't advocate for that. Not to say that you were at all, but I'm
Yeah,
just
no, no, I
saying,
would agree with you too. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, as parents, like that's, in my opinion, that's their job. That's number one priority in parenting, creating an emotionally safe, predictable, and certain environment. Because everything else could change. Your
Yeah.
financial situation in life could change, your physical situation, your health, your presence. Something might happen to me and I die. So these things might not be constant and permanent for my kid. But my love and support and being the rock for that kid, in my opinion, that's the emotional communication that I should strive to communicate to him.
Mm.
And I think that I'm bringing this up because, and you know the details about this, but definitely my experience was shaped largely by emotional instability. And I think that growing up, and I think that really affected my tolerance for risk and my tolerance
Yeah.
for uncertainty, and kind of spilled over to my experience in New York when I first moved, because it touched up on like deeper layers of my identity, which is not just the certain physical and material and structural, tangible structural things. It touched on the emotional layer that I grew up with, which was uncertain.
Yeah.
So, yeah, all of this back to, I think, the how uncertainty, a healthy dose of a certain type of uncertainty, I think for children
It was
is
critical.
important.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. It's like foundational. I completely agree with you. I think with children, but I guess my question too though is like how do you prepare them? Yes, I agree. I totally agree.
Mm,
You should provide that love and emotional security and so forth, right? And I think once they have that foundation, I feel like anything that happens to they can handle it in the future. Like, but at the same time, how do you teach them about that? Like, how does that reflect when they enter relationships with people, whether that's friendships, whether that's
mm,
romantic, whether that's professional? Like, how does that, yeah, translate from the family to other
mm.
relationships with people, right? Because, people get hurt when you
Yeah,
fall in love or, and then they
true.
fall out of love or rejection, right? Dealing with rejection, professional rejection, romantic
Right.
rejection. Like, there's so much uncertainty, yeah, if we take it to like the micro, like so much uncertainty in the ways in which we relate to one another. How do
Right.
you prepare a child for that? Because I
Right.
say that because I don't feel like I was prepared for that at all. I don't, in the sense that I grew up in a very loving home, like very emotionally supportive home. But like I think about for the case for a lot of people who grew up in like Muslim background or whatever, like no one
Mm,
talks about the uncertainty of dating. Like no, I had to figure that out. And my mom will always say, "Well, I had to figure that out." I'm like, "Yeah, I understand, but it was a
mm,
different context because you were in Somalia and I'm in America and I wasn't around Muslims or so dating was one thing that I think I struggled with
mm.
a lot because I was just like, I don't know how to navigate this at all, given my background and it causing so much when I was much younger, like stress and insecurity. So I avoided it tremendously.
Yeah.
I'm just curious, yeah, like how do parents or you intend or what do you recommend we do for children in the future so that they're not like
Right. No,
have
brilliant
that level of
question.
stress. Yeah, like or rejection
Right.
professionally. Like I suffered a lot when I was like, I'm smart. I was conditioned that like I went to good school, I got good grades. Like, why aren't I being rewarded for that? And
Yeah.
it's not that my parents did a bit, they did the best that my parents are, I'm not like speaking negatively of my parents in that respect. I think there was cultural differences. It was just not something they
Right.
discussed, which is fine. But again, they grew up in a completely different culture than I did. So it kind of just provided me with a lot of like in the past insecurities
Mm,
and sort of pressure and judgment, like just the level of like, and I don't think this is, I think American kids feel this way too. I think, you know, entering friendships or dating or relationships is awkward no matter what. But I always thought,
right.
like, why didn't anyone fucking tell me how to do this? Like I was being taught by Hollywood and I was like a dumbass up until like 5, 7 years ago. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Grow up in like
Yeah.
a family that was devout. I don't like to say religious because they're not like weird. As I say, like they know they keep that in
Yeah.
check. They know how to behave like they're normal people.
Mm.
So I don't know. Yeah, it's something I think about, like how
Oh,
do you
brilliant
understand?
question. No, I think it's a brilliant question because the way I think about it is that, and there's a lot of research about the following, that the voice of the primary caregiver or givers with an S, plural, that
Hmm.
becomes the inner voice of the child. So the way you
Yeah.
speak to them, the language that you use, the body language, which is one could argue even more important than the words that you use, it becomes part of the inner world, the inner voice that they hear in their head. So I think that's where my job starts and ends. As long as I think that the inner voice, which is my voice that I'm instilling in the kid, is balanced, is loving, compassionate, empathic, forgiving.
Mm,
Forgiving is very important because
yeah.
the world is going to be harsh. It's going to be difficult. The last thing I want is for my kid to beat himself up after the world has beaten him up. So the
Mm,
least I can do is try to the best of my ability that inner voice to continue to be soft and encouraging and resilient, like encouraging resilience.
yeah.
Uh, so, and from there, as he enters these relationships that you mentioned, friendships, work, love, romantic relationships, and they might succeed or fail. He will get hurt. That's a fact
Yeah.
of life.
Yeah.
As long as the core remains intact. I think we all get hurt in different ways. The core remains intact.
Yeah.
So he doesn't start developing habits that are self-destructive. That's a good sign to me that then the inner voice is healthy enough where he can bounce back.
Mm.
Um, so it's not internalizing the hurt to a degree where it becomes a cycle of self-destruction. I think that's the goal I would love for him. But then add to that a layer, which I think in our case is very important, is if people have high level of empathy or sensitivity. And when I say sensitivity, emotional, psychological, picking up the energy of the room, understanding the body language of other people. So we take in way more than the average person in terms of the experience we go into. And
Mm.
I think in those particular experiences for these type of people, which have been described as highly sensitive people, HSP, I don't know if you identify as one, but I mean, we
What's
can
it
talk
called?
a highly sensitive person.
Yeah,
So they're,
100%. Oh my God. But
yeah,
I
I
feel
think,
like, yeah, yes, I would say I'm very, hence why I like just spend a lot of alone time. You're in your
yeah, no,
cave, and
no,
then I'm
it's
just like keeping to
100%.
myself. I say cave because of human design. Lubna knows the reference, but for me,
Yes, of
it's
course.
just I do, yeah. Like I need a lot of alone time. So I would argue that I think if you need a lot of alone time, not because I'm depressed or anything, I'm like very emotionally fine. It's more just I just get drained really easily, and I am sensitive, 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So with that type of personality, then you have that extra layer of care that should go into preparing that child for the world because that child with a highly sensitive personality is probably going to take in way more data, will process the data longer and deeper. And that's what highly sensitive people do. They
yeah.
read, they collect more data, they process it for longer, they process it deeper. So
Mm,
they're great, excellent learners. They're great, excellent people to have intimate, close relationships with because they're real. You see the
yeah,
depth, the breadth. They cannot operate on surface level. But the downside definitely is when they get hurt, they get hurt.
yeah,
Uh, and back to your question, I think as a parent is the obligation, the responsibility that I take upon myself when I bring a child to this world, a word out to the parents or the parents to be. I think it's our responsibility to fully see and understand the child's personality and work with that,
yeah,
not see what we want to see, not just blindly apply what we grew up with, I know we
Hmm.
have a lot of well-intentioned parents, all of blah, 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 blah. We're all well-intentioned. I think Hitler was well-intentioned. Let's just put it out there.
Yeah.
No, for real.
Yeah. No,
Because like,
100%.
yeah, no one thinks in their head, I'm an evil, malicious, hurtful person. It's because they're so blind to their own pain and hurt, they start taking it out on people. And
Yep.
my invitation to people out there is take the time to see where your pain is. Work with your pain because if you don't, it's going to spill over to those you love.
Yeah.
And that's the problem. You're not going to see your child for who she is. And then you will miss out on the opportunity to prepare her for the world. And we go to the scenario where there is confusion or loss or development of really unhealthy, self-destructive habits when life hits them hard.
Yeah.
So that's my 2 cents. I don't know if it's useful to anyone, but that's how I'm thinking about it, and I'm trying to the best of my ability to educate myself and um, work with the experiences that I was given in life. But so
Wait, can I
from
add to
that,
that?
yes,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Can I
sure,
add to
sure.
that point? Because I liked what you
Yeah,
said about sort of the ways in which, parents need to get to know and accept their child's personality. There's two things of it speaks to like the uncertainty sort of topic that we're doing now, because it made me think about how, yeah, people have kids and then they apply that mentality to their kids as well of like I need a certain type of like that certainty of like so like it plays out. That's what I'm trying, I guess that's what I was trying to say earlier with like the collective and the individuals, like that level of uncertainty or that fear of uncertainty bleeds into everything, and it can bleed onto your kid where you don't, because when you have a child, I don't know yet, but it's you don't know what kind of child or personality is going to have. That's the most uncertain thing you can do is to have a child, right? Because you don't know, so many layers of it, like health, whatever, gender. You don't know. You are leaving it up to the source, God, whatever you believe, to give you, and then that child comes however that child comes. And it feels like that's why there's so many issues in so many ways is people project on if you don't do the inner work. You know what I'm saying? If you're not really willing to sort of heal yourself in any in any way, you're gonna it's exactly what you said. It just made me think of how, yeah, like having a child is the most uncertain thing you do, but we even in that we don't allow sort of the beauty of it. I think that's a beautiful example of
brilliant.
uncertainty on some level,
Yes,
Like
yes,
it's beautiful to
absolutely.
know like I gave birth or I have this child, I adopted this child, and that child is going to come to me as they are, and the level of growth that comes, I would assume, from having a child and just for you even to let them be who they are
Yeah,
it's really beautiful. Like, and obviously, I think we can universally agree of what you said earlier, Lubna, of just emotional security, providing that sort of inner self that they can really love themselves is what you're really saying. Like, what can I do to provide them emotional safety for themselves and love themselves and be secure in that? That anything
yeah,
that comes to them in this uncertain world, they will be fine, because they will get hurt, like you said.
yeah,
So it's just,
yeah,
yeah, I was just thinking about, yeah, like we don't allow kids, and that's like the most, I would assume the like joyful part of it is like, oh, like when people say, I didn't know, like she laughs this way, or it's all these little things, there's such spectacle that's really beautiful. You see this
yeah,
change, but then it's like they start talking, they start being more explicit in their personality, and that's kind of when people freak out, good or bad. Like I don't think I think children are innocent, it doesn't matter, but it's like that's what all that social conditioning, those expectations of
right.
what you want, of what your child should be, and the pressure. And it just is really disheartening because I think, yeah, it's like that to me is where the beauty is in those sort of
Yeah.
types of relationships. So,
Oh, 100%. It's
yeah,
beautiful because I was, as you were asking about relationships, that question, I thought of two types of relationships where uncertainty is at its height, and it was parenting and love relationships. But even
yeah,
parenting is even more uncertain, or like parent-child relationship, because again, you don't know what will come out. You
yeah,
have no idea. Um, and with love, it can go either direction. You have some sense at the beginning, I guess. You're reading the personality of another adult. But
yeah,
with a child, it's unfolding before your eyes, and there's this there's that bond, that connection between you and this being. that should stay for life,
Yeah.
regardless of how they turn out. So it's a difficult, I guess, endeavor if the child did not turn out as maybe some people wanted or expected, or not to take this to a very dark corner, but serial killers are the children of someone,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
they turned out
absolutely.
in that way. Yeah, and I think it was Ted Bundy, very famous serial killer, who spoke, I think, in one of the interviews and said, someone asked him, the interviewer asked him about his parents and his upbringing and his childhood. And Ted Bundy immediately said, my parents have nothing to do with what I did. I
Mm.
was raised in a loving, caring home, and this has nothing to do with my parents. That's me. And he says that. So I love see, like, it's an extreme example, but again, in the many podcast episodes, you'll notice I bring extreme examples because to me they illustrate the exceptions or the concept or whatever we're discussing. So in that scenario, I'm pretty sure the parents did not hope for a serial
No,
killer
yeah.
as a
Yeah. No
child.
one's like,
So
yeah, I can't wait to have a psychopath of a child.
exactly,
You know,
exactly.
it's a risk.
So,
It's all a risk. It's the highest level of uncertainty. Like I said, it is absolutely a risk, you know?
and how do we work with risk? And I guess that makes me think about the danger of premature certainty when we try to cling to answers at any cost because we want an answer too
Yeah.
early. It freezes growth. And I think that is a very fertile ground for dogma, just like rigid ideologies. And I think a lot of these movements that are out there, they capitalize on people's fear and anxiety around uncertainty by providing these immature answers and sometimes answers that are incorrect or answers to questions that cannot be answered.
Yeah.
So I think that's a really um, an opportunity for people to just pause and ask the question, A, is this a question I can answer now? And if I answered it, is this just a permanent answer? Can this answer change with time? What requires this answer to? So having some flexibility around making decisions in our lives and understanding the questions and answers and not falling into this intellectual laziness because
Yeah.
we want comfort.
But it goes back to other episodes too. We've talked about Lubna where like, yeah, comfort can be really dangerous, like in the context of certain like hyper rich welfare states where they give everything and then it sort of bleeds into a
Mm,
lack of innovation within those respective societies, right? Like even and then that's the same with you internally, right? Like this is what I'm trying, I guess what I'm trying to connect, it's like the macros, the micro, like the collective, like we're all kind of mirroring each other on a bigger and small level, but it's like you can't fear the growth. You can't fear it. Like the fear is what's killing us with the uncertainty, I think. And you're just not going to evolve on a deep level. And I
Can
guess,
yeah, I
yeah.
have a very
Does
like
that make sense though? Like, you know
strong
what I'm
thought.
saying?
No,
Like
absolutely,
I'm
but
just
fear of
like we're
growth.
avoiding growth, and it's like, and that
But you know
the end.
why?
Yeah. Why? What's up?
I mean, I don't want to speak on behalf of everyone, but I'm just saying, in my case, I learned that I did have a fear of growth, almost a paralyzing fear, because I've been socialized to be small and
Yeah.
I've been socialized to almost be invisible. And that's going back again to an environment back in Qatar where it was ultra religious, and they taught us in schools that we have to cover up, and woman's voice is awra, which means it's a sin. So
Yeah.
we couldn't laugh, for example, in the bus when we were in elementary school because the driver is a man, and if he hears your voice, he will be
Wait,
turned on. So,
really?
oh
Even
yeah,
as
of
a,
course.
oh, wow.
Yeah, absolutely. So and we're supposed to wear the hijab and all of these things. Again, we dismissed all of that. We as my sisters, my friends, like we all knew it's bullshit. But again, it does something to your psyche.
Yeah.
When the external world keeps on telling you you need to be small, invisible, preferably, occupying a very small corner where we can't see you or hear you. What does that do to a person when they walk to an economy that to survive, you have to grow, to expand, to occupy space and time and your voice to be heard? Think about that. So to these structures that they built in that way, I tell them respectfully, fuck you,
Yeah.
right? Fuck you
Yeah,
for
100%.
doing that to an entire generation of women. And I'll say specifically, it is targeting women. And I'm someone who chose to get out of that. Again, I wasn't like raised in the handmaid's tale in a way. No one was holding me back, but I left that on my own at my own expense. No country supported me or scholarships or all of that, that these welfare states support their kids when they go, from the Middle East, they go to the US or elsewhere to study, or I did that all on my own, given that I came from a country at the time that was at war. So that added a layer again of lack of support on the political scene, the international scene, and immigration laws. So all of that, the takeaway for me that this came at an extreme cost to me. And I'm realizing the cost at this stage of my life because of how sinister that that integration into your psyche, um, how sinister it is because it started so early in your childhood, and you learn to just keep on rejecting it and rejecting it and rejecting it, but without having an alternative solution. I was not presented at the time with a different worldview where it told me, or showed me at least, this is another way for you to exist. I saw, for example, my parents, my household, which was extremely, extremely moderate to a liberal household in terms of religion and culture, were Syrians and not religious at all. But still, like you're immersed in an environment where all my best friends lived in that world. So I would go to their homes and I would hear these kind of conversations and the struggles they went through. So I kind of digressed, but the point I guess we started off is about the expansion and the
But can I just
ability to
say something
expand.
that it's such a
Yeah.
spiritual and psychological warfare, what you went through. That's spiritual warfare to me. Side note. Just like the ways in which they're just saying, like, yeah, be careful with your voice. Like, it is a way to make you small. Like, all of that, it's just, sorry, I'm just getting irritated because it's a form of psychological warfare, what they do in these religious
Yeah.
cultures and societies. Um,
Because the preparation starts so early. It's not about when she's all of a sudden like 25, when the danger kicks in, because now she's fertile and she can go
yeah,
around, sleep around, and have children from other men. And now you have
yeah,
to share the resources of the tribe with these other men. What a dishonorable thing, right? So in order to avoid that point, the instruction and the preparation starts early. You are
yeah,
less than, you should not be seen, you should not be heard, know your place in society, all of these messages. So I agree with you. It is warfare. And this is, I think both of us agree, this is not like again a conspiracy theory kind of approach
no,
that there's this malicious world power in I don't know, Middle East or whatever that's trying to design way to oppress women. I think it's just built into the fabric that power is not to be shared. Woman's honor is tied to the family's honor, hence control the honor early on in every possible way, so you wouldn't reach the point where you have to control her and it's too late anyways at that point.
yeah,
So there are a lot of these values that operate in that system that ultimately feed into the same idea. We fear the expansion of women in particular, and I would argue also of men. Like it's generally not
yeah, it
and
hurts
I don't
men
want to
too.
generalize
Yeah,
over
yeah,
the Middle East is a very big place and different countries, different histories. I don't agree with generalizing that level. But I'm saying places, in my opinion, that had the Wahhabi version of Islam, the Puritan version of
yeah,
it, that is very extreme in its views, very oppressive and and fights off any expressions of growth and abundance in every possible way. So in these settings, I would say even men are extremely oppressed because you want to make them follow that dogma. So the dogma doesn't make people expand. So yes, back to your point about growth, why we fear growth. people have different stories, but in my case, that was the story.
Yeah. I think I just had this random thought that I'm going to share with you, which is that I think the origins of all this obsession with certainty is totally rooted in patriarchy, because patriarchy is this extreme version of like toxic divine masculinity, which is all about control, rational behavior, predictability. And I feel like all of this is happening because of patriarchy. That's my personal like side note that I wanted to share. It's like I really think this is all rooted in the
Mm,
system we live in because it's so it's happening everywhere. People's fear of it's all about control, certainty. This plays out everywhere, Lubna. I mean, for the majority of the world that we live in
great.
today. So, and that those terms, these words I just said, where can you have growth in that? Where? How is that possible to have growth when you're obsessed with control, rationality, pragmatic? Um, yeah.
Efficiency,
Yeah,
optimization.
like think about like the right, you know how we always talk about like the right versus the
Right,
left. Like there's no
right,
way the left is where all of that happens. Like the feminine.
right.
And so, and people are fearful of the feminine. Even women are fearful of the feminine within themselves because they don't have the
I was
knowledge.
terrified of
Yeah,
the
I didn't have
feminine.
that. Of
I
course, I
was
was
terrified.
hyper right mind. I'm still freaking working on the right side of my brain because it's very dominant in me. But yeah, like, and these are energies, by the way, like clarification, we all have, men and women. I want to say, like, this is
Right.
not just limited to like women or men, but we're all kind of being pushed. We have been in the last like 10,000 years, pushed into this emphasis of, you know, to be more right-minded, you know, be more in our masculine energy in this respect. And so I think that's why growth, it's just not, you have to do so much deconstruction and deconditioning, Lubna, to be able to even be willing to grow, right? Like, I thought for the longest time what I believed was what I had to believe. There was no other alternative, you know, like there was nothing else. I was, and that's where the struggle came in for me, was I needed to
Mm,
believe this because if I didn't, you know, the consequences would be huge, or I could go to hell, or all these types of things, you know? But once I started doing the inner work and I was tapping more into my, I don't know if it's anima or animus, but like the feminine side of me, as like Carl Jung calls it, and I was
mm,
willing to just let go of that box I had put myself in, the others put myself in, and that I believed I had to be in, the growth that came about, the freedom, the sort of lessening of anxiety and internal stress that I had was immense. And then that bleeds into every other part of me that wants to grow. It's not just limited to that one thing. Once you do it once, you see how
mm.
you can grow in so many other parts of who you are. So that's how I feel about it. I just think again, there's the growth. Yeah. Is that what you're, the fear of growth, right? Like why aren't we, is that what you were asking?
Yeah,
Sorry.
I love your approach, like feeding the feminine,
Yeah,
which is the
this is a
creative
spiritual
engine.
warfare. This is what I'm saying. Like what you went through was spiritual warfare. Some ways what I went through was spiritual warfare too. It's just not as explicit. But like I can relate to you in this sense too, because I've told you this, but like, you know, when I went to college and I wanted to meet other Muslims, and then I met these
Right.
Muslims and they
Yeah.
were like Wahhabi basically, and it was weird, but I don't really connect with the American kids. And I was just like so distraught because I was like, and then being told that like I'm using the wrong terminology, I'm not the right kind of Muslim. And I'm like, oh my God, nothing is ever enough. That at that point, it's like
Yeah.
that was destroying to me too, until I found a few friends that felt similarly. So it felt less um harsh internally. But yeah, what were you gonna say? Sorry.
Yeah, about how the feminine kind of saved you and is saving you in a way because it feeds into other aspects of your life once you allow the creative engine to work, which I think we has been suppressed for a while by virtue
Yeah.
of the way we're socialized and educated and about optimization, rationality, all the things in the masculine energy space. Um, so yeah, maybe that's the answer for people to inhabit and live in their feminine a bit more, embracing it, and the feminine energy, as people probably know, is more the creative, the intuition, the expansion, and rest,
Yes.
nothingness, back to the theme that you brought
Surrender.
up.
Surrender
Yeah,
is the big thing, you know? Surrender to the uncertainty. Like that's really what it comes down to. And I don't think it has to be this big thing. It can always start small. Like whatever thing you
right.
feel like just to test it a little bit. But I always say, if there's some part of you that is stuck in a certain paradigm or thought process, just start small, because
Yeah.
it's just,
I love the surrender. I think many philosophers, and we talked about that, spiritual traditions talk about surrender and how it looks like, but surprisingly, I think people don't associate Friedrich Nietzsche with surrender on like that kind of spiritual direction. But he talked about, I think the expressions amore fati, or which is loving the what unfolds, like
yeah,
being in that flow, but not only building this love relationship with the uncertain, instead replacing the anxiety and the fear um, with healthy anticipation, healthy excitement, um, basically overcoming the socialization and the conditioning that many of us go through. So, with that thought, Hawa,
stay searching and stay
and stay
unscripted.
unscripted. Bye,
Thanks,
everyone.
Lubna. Bye, everyone.
Thanks, Hawa.
And that's a wrap on this week's Unscripted conversation. Don't forget to subscribe to Unscripted with Lubna and Hawa wherever you get your podcasts so you never miss an episode. We'll be back with a brand new one next Wednesday. Until then, keep it unfiltered, unapologetic, and unscripted.